running a business is a tough and lonely journey. Welcome to the Executives on the Front Lines podcast, where business owners and C-suite executives like you will get real answers to your everyday business problems. I'm your host, Jeff Palacio, and together we will learn from senior leaders who have occupied every top box of a company's org chart for every size organization and who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. Welcome to the Executives on the Frontline podcast. I'm Jeff Palacio, your host, and today we're going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart: companies' profit optimization, looking at their customers from both financial data and customer data. Today's expert is Baron Lucas. Baron, welcome to the podcast.
Jeff, it's been a long time. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's great. You're phenomenal. I'm excited about this because this is in my wheelhouse in terms of data and insights and analytics. But if you kind of could summarize this profit optimization tool that you use to help customers, what are we talking about here, Baron?
Yeah, it's a AI technology-based platform that does the data crunching and gives you the analytics to be able to figure out what's going on in terms of profitability. But it's more than that. It's the entire service revolves around going to a client. Most of the clients that I've seen need a CFO assessment or review of their financials, because it's like when we were kids and computers were new, garbage in is garbage out. And I've seen that with some folks that the data isn't quite right. So it takes a while. And to avoid that, we go in and we clean up the financial if that's required. Chart of accounts, making sure that the P&L is correct, customer data is correct, and the two marry up particularly well. Then the data is just very unobtrusively, very easily transported electronically to this AI machine. And what it does is what used to take months, years. I know I did this manually now 13, 14 years ago, and it took me a year and a half to figure it out. But the reality is, and this is really the reality and why we're here, is that years ago, call it probably a decade or more ago, the Boston Consulting Group put out a thing that said that in their history with their clients had 50% of their customers or products that were not profitable on average.
Wow.
50.
Yeah.
Right? So a Boston Consulting Group professional started doing some analytics, came up with this process, and he's the genius behind the AI algorithms. And so what we have found now in the more recent history, that our clients have either customer, product, or services at the level between 30 and 40% that are just not profitable, or at best marginally profitable. Right. So that's the problem statement. The real issue is that they don't know it, because their financial reporting systems do not give them the availability to take a look down to the customer level and determine profitability. It's just not part of the ERP. It's not part of NetSuite or QuickBooks, that kind of thing.
And especially in the B2B world, where there's, multiple locations and things like that, it gets lost, and they're just not equipped to look at it from that, perspective too.
What we've done here at ExecHQ, and we'll be doing more of these podcasts to talk about specialty services. So we stood up ExecHQ Profit Optimization because it is a perfect bolt-on to almost any engagement, right? Because if I get called in to be a chief of staff, or if I get called in to do ExecHQ Multiple for pre-transaction, there has to be a question: how are you doing profitability-wise? And I always ask for a CFO assessment to be done at no or low cost, because our CFOs can do some cost reduction, check, make sure that the financials are done correctly, and have a good chart of accounts. We understand what the company is doing, and now you're both on a profit optimization, and you can raise your net profitability by 30, 40%, not necessarily overnight, but in very short order. So to give you an example, if I save $10 million and I have an example of this of a company that within a few months returned to profitability $10 million of extra profit.
Wow.
That they didn't, they fired some people, some customers, they raised some margin, they did some things with guided discussions. Well, if that company goes to sell, and let's say they're a 7 multiple, 7 times 10 million is $70 million of enterprise value that was returned to them by just understanding the profitability of their clients or customers. Right? So back to the process. We go in, we do a CFO assessment, we clean things up and make sure everything is correct. It gets filtered into the analytics machine, and it determines what is happening. It'll tell you why it's happening. It'll give you some what happens if you do this, and then it'll tell you what to do in terms of priority to change your profitability. So within a day, again, it took me a year and a half, and I fired, at that point, I fired 30% of my customers in that company. 30% gone. They were not only not profitable, they weren't even paying. So in this case, you get a report back that tells you, here are all your customers. And I had a client a couple years ago that had like 500 customers. It was a very long list for a small technology-enabled business services company. And what we found out is basically here's where you are. Here is the loss you have in profitability based on the percentage of non-profitable customers. And here's the loss of your profit and the loss to your enterprise value based on the multiple that your industry puts you in. So let's say you're a 5 or 4 to 5 or 6 or 7. It'll give you that number very quickly. And then there is a page after page of how everything is laid out. So the system checks for allocation of cost of goods sold, basic operating costs, cost of client acquisition. All that stuff is figured out based on some averages and the data that we have. And it gives you a very accurate indication from this is the most profitable you have down to, oops, Cinco in the red, you're losing money. In the case of the client that had that 500 or so customers, firing the bottom 5 customers that were not profitable, just firing them, doubled that company's net profitability. Doubled. Wow. That's how much loss they had, and they didn't know it.
Wow.
That's the scary part. So you get the report, and then what we do is we take a look at the report with the client, and then we build a prioritized action item list to determine what needs to happen first and when and how. And then there's an implementation plan. And what I like to do is take it out for a year. So the first one gives you by customer. That's the most basic. You figure that out, and then you get an implementation plan, to get that resolved. Then maybe the next one is by product or services. Right? I mean, if you're a electronic manufacturer or an aerospace manufacturer, you better know how you're doing profitability-wise by product. So now you got customer already figured out, and we're working on that. Now we go by product. We add that into the equation. And then maybe the third one is by geography or some other demographic, because we can pull any demographic that you can think of to see where the profitability lies. And what happens is that you have the initial data, the what's happening, why it's happening, what is some of the outcomes that could happen, then a prioritized list of what you need to do. We give the implementation plan, advise the company on what to do when, advise the chief revenue officer on margin changes or how we tweak the system so that we don't have loss leaders. Everybody has a loss leader. Some of that is necessary, but most of it is not. So let's get rid of it. And then what happens over time, as we change the demographic or as we refine the report, what I like to do is to do it by quarters. So if we start, let's say, in the first quarter of next year, we do it every quarter. And then at the end of the year, the refinement is extraordinary. Right? So it's very unobtrusive, right? It's not intrusive. It is a very easy thing to do. It doesn't do anything to operations or sales plan or anything else. It just increases profitability. And the customers that we identify as we need to raise them, raise their margin or raise the amount sold, or we need to just ask them to find their product elsewhere. That's done in a very methodical but also intelligent way, so we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as we try to do this. Then at the end of the year, the profitability increases are incredible. It's a low cost process based on the ROI. I mean, in the case of the company that gained $10 million back, the ROI for the services, the advisory services, and what the result was after 1 year was 38 times the cost was regained in profitability and enterprise value.
Wow.
You can't beat that. Right?
Yeah. I know a lot of CEOs, founders, C-suite, the mantra is, I never met a customer I didn't like, right? So, the whole firing the customer concept is kind of almost counterintuitive. How do you kind of get over that hump in terms of convincing? I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, but still, it's like, oh my God, we're going to get rid of, the one that your example of only getting rid of 5 customers, but I'm sure there's examples where you have to get rid of 100 customers or something like that. But
well, there may be. I haven't seen 100 customers. I think what happens is, and since we don't have video aids here, but there are charts that tell you this customers in the upper quadrant. So good quantity, good margin, keep them, right? Then there is the customer that's got low quantity, good margin, but you're not making a lot of money based on the effort. Increase quantity, right? And you've got a customer that's got good quantity of flow of sales, but poor margin, increase margin. Well, to how much? Well, until ouch, right? Until you start seeing a decrease, and you have to play with that. But if they're not profitable, then why are you doing it? And I understand loss leaders. I understand. Well, I can't fire that guy because my God, what happens? Well, look at it. Look at do an analysis of this is good and that's not so good, and how do we do that? You'll come up with logical formulations, logical decisions on raising margin or asking them potentially to buy a product that is less expensive for the same value. There's a lot of things you can do without firing. Then there's those that you kind of go, holy smokes, what are we doing? And what I've seen reaction from clients is, I didn't know. How did that happen?
Right.
Why was the margin so low? And then in my case, 14 years ago, was we were allowing salespeople to kind of charge what they wanted to in certain locations. There's been no margin control. Well, then you're stuck. I mean, if Joe Billy Bob, your sales guy, is selling at 2% margin because he's selling it to his brother-in-law, now you got a challenge, right?
Right.
But those really, really not good customers that you cannot increase sales, you cannot increase margin, you have to make a decision. And then it just, what am I gaining by doing it? Or what would I lose if I lose the customer? And it's a win-loss formula, and it's up to the client to make the decision. All we can do is advise and give them, if you do this, this is what happens. Now, I'm not a sales guy. You are, and so certainly in that market. But I've been on many, many sales calls. And it's a matter of talking to the customer and seeing what can be done. Right? And if it's not salvageable, then you might just want to fire the customer.
Right.
But if you can just get into the mindset of the business owner, and I've done this as a COO, as a CEO owner, and as a president of a company over the last 17 years, that you have to know who's profitable and who's not. And if you understand that no matter how good your company is, the odds are that 30 to 40% of your customers are not profitable, then this is a absolute no-brainer, low-cost, high ROI service that should be a bolt-on for everything that ExecHQ does. And if I have my way, it's going to be, because it just makes sense. And even if the outcome is, well, only 7% of my customers are not profitable, great. At least you know.
Right.
And the cost of the service is low enough where the gain of those 7% becoming profitable will more than pay for anything else that you do with ExecHQ.
So, Baron, this obviously helps companies, and it's an amazing tool because I've been in your, some of the examples you said. I mean, I've done analysis on customers, and it takes months in terms of getting all the data and doing the
Right.
analysis. But what other types of firms that will this tool help?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's start with what kind of clients, what kind of businesses is it suited for? Not well suited for a startup, because we really need a year or two, three of revenue and operations to get on our belt to understand profitability. So for the VC world, not so much. Right. So, but any company that's been in revenue operations for 3 to 4 to 5 years and beyond, perfect fit. Size of company does not really matter because the price is so affordable that a $5 million company can do it just as well as a $500 million company. And it doesn't really matter in terms of the analysis. Now, the advisory services may be higher based on the complexity of bigger businesses, but still, it's affordable. Where it really, I think, has a incredible value is in 3 categories. The first category is people in our age group that are looking to exit, or anybody that's looking to exit. If you're looking to exit and you have a couple of years ahead of you, now if you want to sell your company in 6 months, this will help, but it's not going to be the value, the ROI that you're looking for. But if you've got 3 to 5 years before you exit, imagine being able to add 30 or 40% more profitability to your business without doing anything other than fixing the problem with your customers, your product. And the value increase to your company over a period of time, what that does to your multiple and to the valuation of the company and the ease of sale, quality of earnings, right, is critical for M&A activity. And this gives you that quality of earnings. So that category is a no-brainer. The other one is family offices. A lot of family offices obviously invest in companies. They buy companies. They don't have necessarily the operating staff that some larger PE firms do. And they may or may not know exactly how the company is being run. So now you have an opportunity to buy a company and check their profitability and then get them more profitable. So you're not left with the Etzel in the garage that doesn't run. Now you got a decent company that's making you good profit, good ROI. Then lastly, PE firms with a smaller capability in terms of operating partners or being able to help the company run. If you don't have the internal analytics to figure out what's going on in a company to the level of profitability, cost control, all the things that a well-run company needs to have, this is a perfect opportunity to make sure that when you buy the company, they have a short window, right? 5 to 7 years, and they're going to sell them again. Let's get them as profitable as we can before that exit has to happen. And now you've got a significant ROI, much better rate of return from your investment. The company does better, you do better, and the buyer ultimately gains by having a more profitable company.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Baron, anything else you would like to add before we end our conversation today?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity, Jeff. And again, this is a new service for ExecHQ. We've been working with it for 2 years, but now we're rolling out for real. If you have any questions, please contact me. I think the podcast will have my calendar page. You can also email solutions@exechq.com, and we'll get back to you and answer all your questions. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, Baron, thank you so much for coming on Executives on the Frontlines podcast today. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Executives on the Front Lines. If you are interested in learning more about today's guest, you can schedule a 15-minute call with them by scanning the QR code or using the link in the episode description. Please join me every 2 weeks to learn from another great leader sharing insight that can help you and your business.